Hello, listeners. Been wondering how you can help the show? Probably not. But here are 5 things you can do. 1. Subscribe. Support the show by clicking the subscription link in the show notes. 2. Review on iTunes, on our website, www.afraidofnothingpodcast.com, or on whatever app you listen to. 3. Donate. When you go to our website, click the cute coffee cup icon, or in the show notes, click the subscription link. 4. Share. Sharing really is caring. Tell your friends and even your enemies to check out the show. 5. Watch. Wait a minute, it's a podcast, not a movie. Actually, it's both. Check the show notes to find out where to watch the documentary. You can also rent it on Prime Video. That's it. Oh, one last thing. Enjoy this episode. So, listeners, tonight we have the near-death experience of near-death experiences for you. And we even have a second one. It's about a great guest, Peter Panagore, who went ice climbing with his partner on the world-famous Lower Weeping Wall along the Icefields Parkway in Alberta, Canada, about 4 decades ago. On their descent, they became trapped on the side of the mountain. As the sun set, Peter was overcome by exhaustion and hypothermia. Peter died on the side of that mountain. And in those minutes on the other side, Peter experienced hell, forgiveness, and unconditional love. The takeaway? Heaven was beautiful.
In a world where nothing is known, nothing is certain, reality is not real. Wake up! Be afraid of nothing. I'm Bob Heskey.
Robert.
The host with the ghost.
This is my podcast, based on my paranormal documentary, Afraid of Nothing. Each episode, we talk to people who see life and the afterlife through a different lens. Join me.
Who is this large man? And what's he doing in our bedroom?
As we lift the veil and open our minds to see beyond our eyes lie. This is Afraid of Nothing.
Reverend Peter Panagore was recruited to TV as the 5th minister of America's oldest religious broadcast. Peter's 2-minute spot aired for 15 years just before the morning weather on NewsCenterMaine on 2 NBC stations, reaching 80,000 viewers a day. Previously, Peter served in New England as a United Church of Christ minister. His Audible Best Seller, Heaven is Beautiful, has been optioned for a film. His first book, 2 Minutes for God, is a non-denominal devotional drawn from his 1,700 TV stories. Peter is working on his 3rd book and provides mentoring to spiritual seekers worldwide. We have a fantastic guest tonight that I've been looking forward to speaking to for quite a while, Peter Panagore. Peter, you've led several different amazing lives. Why don't you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us the breakdown of who you are and how death has impacted who you are today?
Hi, Robert. I should say hi, Robert, first. And I've been 3 people, Robert, in my life. I was born one person. I died when I was 21, and I became another person. And then I died in 2015. I became another person after that. As a child, I was a little mystical anyway. I had an inclination in that direction. But when I died, I came back an entirely different person than I had been the day before. And the second time I died in 2015, I once again came out the other side different than I was the day before. It's hard to explain, except for I'll put it this way, that I had planned as a youngster to become an architect in my family's business, and I'd spent my entire life pushing a pencil on paper and learning construction with my dad, and then going into construction while I was a student in college. And after I died, I abandoned all of that. I couldn't deal with it. I had to go pursue this other place, this other thing that had happened to me, this reality that was more real than the real that we have here. It overwhelmed all of my life and all of my relationships. When I came back, all of my relationships changed. Everybody thought I was the same person I was, but I wasn't anymore.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, this was like in the 1980s, right? 1981 or
Yeah,
1982?
80.
Okay. Was the Raymond Moody book, Life After Death, out then? Or was there anything out in the world that you could read or listen to get some closure and some sense of familiarity? Or were you pretty much on your own?
I was pretty much on my own. Moody's book was out, and eventually, and what year was that? 86. 86, it came across my vision, and it changed my life because I now knew what I was. But up until 86, I had no idea. I had no framework for this. There was no way for me to look it up and nobody to ask, because even to me, it sounded crazy when I spoke it out loud to myself. So I knew enough to keep my mouth shut about it. So I was entirely on my own. But I had been an English major at UMass Amherst, and in my English department, I'd read the Transcendentalists and the Romantics, which led me into the Upanishads and some other places because of Emerson and Thoreau. So I knew that there had been other people who may have been like me in the history of the world, and so I went in pursuit of them. Those people became my peer group. They're all dead writers from all over the world, cultures, mystical geniuses, Rumi and Hafez and Lao Tzu and the Upanishads and the Vedas and the Sutras. There's just a long list of books that I read. Inside the books, I found my peers.
So your first near-death experience, which we're going to go into in detail shortly, if I recall hearing, did the spirit or entity tell you that your life was going to be different and you weren't going to live for yourself, or did you just discover that when you came back?
No. I was told. I said, I chose to come back. I asked to come back, and I was given the choice to come back. And I said, if I can come back, plus I'm in this non-linguistic place. The whole idea of concepts and ideas and language, they didn't exist where I was. So all of this, I say it's in language. It's not. It's something else. And I said, in some other way, telecommunicating directly, I said, if I go back to my life, can I come back here to this heaven? And the voice said, yes, you can come back here. I said, well, then I choose to live my life. And the voice says, you won't live your life, and shot me away.
Wow.
And I came back here, and I spent much of my life, decades of my life, trying to figure out what had happened to me. And I did not live my life, and I was pretty angry about it. I got back here, and I was not the same person I was. So when I was dead, I expected, I'm going to go back and be the same person I was. But when I got back to life again, I was not the same person. And not only was I not the same person, I was in an entirely different world. The world I was in now had leaking light everywhere, but the whole thing was made like in two-dimensionality of black and white flickering, 1920s cartoon-ish. Very two-dimensional, very ugly, very not pure beauty, not pure light, not pureness at all, crudeness. And I was pretty upset. And not only that, I was given a job and then given no way to do it. And I didn't want the job. I came back a rebellious person.
It's kind of like having a great full-size, huge, great, wonderful HD TV or whatever it is now, and then waking up the next morning and finding you have a very small, staticky black and white, like from 1960, that you got to bang on with the rabbit ear or something.
Yeah, with a lot of
fuzz. The way
fuzz.
you looked at life was literally your rods and cones, and the way you perceived it, the symbols that are in front of us, had an awakening.
Yeah, it was a big awakening for me. The world that I craved and loved was no longer here. My heart came back with a longing for the state of union that I had been in, where beauty and peace, truth, knowledge, understanding, bliss, healing, wholeness, all these things were one thing, and they were the totality of all there is. And I craved this thing. And so I craved it with all of my heart, my vision, my attachment to the world. I became non-attached to the world because of my attachment to the divine. And so that left me an alien in my own body in this world. I was a stranger in a strange land.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I've often felt from even a younger age that I almost felt like a little man in a big body or whatever. I felt like, you look out at the world through your body, you kind of can see your limbs and stuff, but I never was a world-class gymnast or anything where I was totally comfortable in my body. I just kind of lumbered through life, and it always felt alien to me as well. It sounds like when you came back, it had to be a blessing and a curse because probably became very cynical about life, or maybe you could confirm that because it fell so far short of where you came back from and what you knew existed.
Yeah, cynical, no. But I can see what you're saying. I came back, I'm trying to find the word. It's disassociated. I was disassociated from everything, all of my relationships to everything, food, money, politics, grass, trees, people I loved, everything. My dog, the dog of my life, my dog.
Yeah.
It was just somehow, I loved everything. I loved everything around me, but they were all less than. And so I lived inside this hellscape. I had been in paradise with a capital P, bliss with a capital B, and then I was stuck back in this hellscape. And it wasn't just hell like the world is full of suffering, as dukkha, as Buddha talks about. My body was. I was like a person trapped one of those medieval bodies, steel bodies or iron, I guess they were, with spikes on the inside, and they put you inside and they lock you inside it, and then they lock the outside it, and you're stuck there with these things sticking inside you. That's what it felt like to me here.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because you were, and we're going to find out, you were an athlete. You were a mountaineer. You were very fit. You could climb mountains, and you did ice climbing. And if you had the right tools, it would have worked out, but it didn't. And we'll find out how shortly. But it seems like you were very attuned and comfortable to your body before this incident. And then afterwards, it felt a little bit alien to you.
It felt completely alien to me. And yeah, I was attuned to my body, been an athlete my whole life. I still am. I rode 20 miles today on my bike. One of the things that happened to me, and I don't get to talk about this very often, is that I came back after my first death dedicated to having fun with my body. I ski, I run, I do everything I can to make, be in the physical world, because I love that feeling of being there, even though it feels like a trap. So I live this contradiction.
I'm envious because we talked about how you were such attuned as an athlete before the NDE, but you now embraced your physicality, even though your life felt different to you. I've always been kind of awkward, and I've played sports, but I haven't been good at it. So I'm jealous to someone that is so attuned to that. If I ever come back, I'd like to be more attuned to my physical being. I'm more in my mind, so I'm half jealous about that.
Well, my wife tells me I live too much in my head, which is true. But my physical world, it was helped after I came back. After I came back, I went back to UMass Amherst, where I took a pantomime class. And my teacher's teacher was Marcel Marceau, who taught Hatha Yoga. And this yoga set me into my body. I was, as you aptly described, I looked through my own eyes out into the world at myself. I was not fully back. Most of me was still in heaven. I knew this to be true, but I also knew that my perception was stuck here. And so I would see the world through my eyes and feel the world through my hands. And I knew that it was like I was software. And I was in the cloud, actually, and I was software in this mechanical body that I was trapped inside of. So I had this dichotomy of being outside myself, and the yoga practice put me back inside myself. At least it started the process.
One of the things that you were supposed to do when you came back, you've done somewhat recently, about 7 or so years ago, a couple decades after you came back, which was writing a great book called Heaven is Beautiful. Do you think that was the ultimate thing? That was your mission after, I know you were in the clergy for a while, you were a reverend, and you did several other things in your life. Do you think that was the ultimate thing you were supposed to do, was to write this book?
I think that it's always been my plan. I was a writer. I was I'm a dyslexic writer when I was a kid, and I'm still dyslexic, but I'd been trying to be a writer my whole life to tell this story. It's not so much the book. It's really the divine energy that came back with me. And the book is a vehicle for the communication of this thing that can't be said. And so the book has been a big thing in my life. Telling this story, I've told it so many times, but it's really not about, for me, it's really not about the story that I tell. It's about the energy that comes with the story that I tell. Because this energy that comes with it isn't mine. My practice in my life is to become a channel of this light, this divine energy, this Shakti in Sanskrit, this divine energy that is contained inside of other things. This book has been fabulous. I was scared when I wrote it that not that the story wasn't going to touch people's lives, but that my writing was going to be of a high enough quality so that I could feel good about it. And so far, so good. But I have other works to do. I am writing another book. The whole process of my development as a communicator is specifically to communicate the presence of the divine itself and to use the tools that are available to me in order to make that a reality.
And we're going to go into your second NDE, which happened in 2015, 7 years ago, which almost gave you a renaissance or a way to re-engage with life, which I think is a great story in itself. But I don't think we want to keep our listeners waiting too much longer. Let's tell them about, if you could relive this ice climbing accident that happened, that you were really literally on the precipice of death. So do you mind walking us through that?
Not at all. So 1980, I just had my birthday in February. I turned 20, born in 59, and I wanted not to go back to Boston, which is where I'm from, Boston area, the hub. And I looked for a high adventure to go on. That's part of the reason I was out west anyways, backpacking on all these different mountain ranges, skiing on the ski patrol and doing all this other stuff. And so I went to the outing club and I found this other guy who had already planned a trip up to Alberta in British Columbia, a 10-day expedition, 8 days snow caving into Mount Assiniboine in British Columbia, which is right on the border of Alberta where the entrance point was. And then 1 day of ice climbing, which was completely up my alley. So I had been a Boy Scout and been winter camping all my life. I was a scout until I was 18, so I could stay out in the wilderness as often as I could and had an excuse to be there. So Tim and I went on this snow caving trip, mountaineering skis, 70-pound packs. We skied out into the wilderness, lived in snow caves, ate our dried food, had an incredible adventure, learned to trust each other with our lives, because this is wilderness that'll kill you. This is March. There's 10 feet of snow on the ground. Just being out and outside can kill you if you're not careful that far north in the cold weather. So we come back into this climb, and I'd been a mountaineer, climbed a lot of mountains and climbed quite a bit of rock with ropes and that sort of stuff. But I'd never climbed ice before. But Tim was a certified lead ice climber, having just completed his class on that, and we decided that we could do this. And I couldn't come up with all the gear I needed. I could only come up with a single axe. You need two, but I've got a hammer, which is a much shorter tool that looks the same or very similar, except for it doesn't have a pick on the bottom. It's got that bird serrated beak that sticks out that clip that right into the ice, but it doesn't have a strap that you can hang and rest on. When a person swings the hammer versus when a person swings the axe has like a foot and a half more reach, or a foot more reach. So what that means is that my climb was slower because I had to rest more often, because I had to grip the hammer and not rest my arms. And my climb was slower because every single time I planted the hammer, it was so much shorter distance than the axe. And so I covered less ground in the same amount of time as everybody else, because there are other teams climbing that day.
Yeah, you mentioned there are like probably 15 to 20 people. I thought I heard before. You probably get out there early in the morning, you start doing it. You probably realize somewhat earlier on this is going to take, you're getting tired very quickly. The equipment is hampering you more than you thought. The average person would ask, if you know you're in trouble, why don't you just kind of rappel down? But actually you can't. You have only one direction, up and then down again when you do ice climbing, correct?
That is the way that it was explained to me. You can, and technical climbing rock climbing is pretty much the same deal. You go up one route and you come down another. It's hard to go down the way that you came up, especially with ice. It's not like you're on a trail and you can just turn around and walk down again. You have to set gear, and you have to be able to rappel down. So imagine this: you have the length of the rope. Let's say the rope is 150 feet, or say it's 100 feet for argument. So it's a 100-foot long rope that from top to bottom. So you have 50 feet of line, because you got to loop it through something. So you're up 50 feet and you're up 50 feet and you're up 50 feet as you're making this climb. What are you going to use to hang on to when you're resetting the rope in another loop? You have to have a place to stand. You have to have a place to be attached to something. Yeah, that's it. You have to have a place that you can stand so you can put the rope through. I don't know. You can't just go down the way you came up.
So how far up were you? What was it, like 500, 600 feet that you had to scale, or?
Yes, 500 or
Okay.
600 feet.
And how far up were you when people started coming back down and you
Oh,
realized,
probably halfway up, and there were the first teams already starting to descend. Maybe 5 teams or 6 teams on the ice, and some had 2 and some had 3 and that kind of thing. And by the time that I ate my lunch, I knew that I was going to be really late getting to the top. And my climbing partner did too. Tim was like, come on, we got to move, got to move, got to move, got to move. And we tried to move, but I could only move so fast. And in the last couple of hours before the sun went down, it became very clear to me the dangerous situation that we were in. And I should tell the audience that I'd been on the National Ski Patrol since I was in high school, and I was working at Bridger Bowl in Montana. And one day in January, the temperature went down to 50 below zero Fahrenheit. And it's cold. And so we had this little refresher course in the lodge on frostbite and hypothermia. Hypothermia, the treatment for hypothermia and the onset of hypothermia, all of the symptoms of it were very fresh in my mind. And I knew that the temperature, because I'd been out for the previous week, that the temperature was going to drop drastically once the sun went down. I was wet. I was wearing wool clothes. This is in the days before, polypropylene had just come out as a long underwear. And I had a polypropylene top, but I was dressed in wool and leather. And so I was sweaty too. And ice was falling down my back all day. Tim was up above me. Whenever he'd chip out the ice, it would fall down on me because he's right above me. And so it's going down my back. So my clothes were wet. One of the things about wool maintains its temperature something like 70%, as opposed to cotton, which is like steals heat from you. So wearing wool was a good idea, but you still lose 30% of your heat when it's wet. And I was wet. And the temperature dropped. We got to the top. As the sun was setting, I climbed up over the top as the sun's going down behind the mountains, and the temperature starts to drop, and it drops, I guess, 30 degrees. It was a huge drop instantaneously, like a curtain fall. And the violent shivers began immediately. And it wasn't even dark yet. It was just, still dusk as the sun went down behind the mountains, and our bodies started pulsating with these odd, crazy rhythms of all these muscles expanding and contracting at the same time. Super shaky. And the last team, I watched them leave, and they turned around and they looked up at us, and this one guy raised his hands, and he might have been giving me the, what are you doing hands, upturned palms, like, what are you, crazy? And I was like, I don't know, man. And they left. Got darker and darker, and the situation was very apparent how deadly it was immediately. Like, this is life or death.
were you at the top and then you had to go down, which is not like a quick rappel. There's a series of rappels, correct?
Yeah, we have to traverse across the mountain in the dark on the ice, and then make 3 rappels, and there are 100, 150 foot rappels each. And they're not like one above the other. They're over to this one. This is the place where it's safe to rappel, and then you got to traverse over to another place. This is the place where it's safe to rappel, and then you go down that one, and then you get around the corner to the last one, and this is the safe place to rappel, and then you get to the bottom. But we kept getting stuck every single time. Something bad happened, and we finally ended up in this situation where the rope was jammed, and there was nothing I could do to get it out. And by the time we reached there, in the dark, having traversed across the mountain with hypothermia. So hypothermia, it steals your mind. It steals your body and it steals your mind. They took away my coordination. So my feet were frozen like blocks of ice, and I was wearing these crampons, and they are spiky things on the bottom of my rigid boots, which meant that my boots couldn't flex anyway, but my feet were frozen. So I'm walking on frozen feet that I can't feel where I'm stepping. I'm losing my coordination. My temperature is dropping. My brain is losing its ability to think clearly and make rational decisions. My lips are so frozen that I can't even speak. My eyeballs start to freeze on the inside. I got frostbite on my fingers, on my feet. I still have problems. I'm wearing half gloves right now as we speak because my hands get so cold and they hurt so much. And so by the time we reach this last rappel, been fighting through the entire night, to survive. I had this part of me that I didn't know existed. As I drove myself forward with, remember, I don't have any food and I don't have any water and I can't get warm. And so I only have my willpower and Tim's willpower. And we are driving each other, both level-headed, nobody panicking. We're just driving ourselves with the strength of our will, one step, trying to be as efficient with our energy as possible, not step where you don't need to step, not move your hand when you don't need to move your hand, because everything I was doing was taking away energy from me. I felt my drain of energy by everything I did. Even my thoughts were draining energy. And so I was driving myself with this willpower of mine that survival. And then I tapped into this place inside my brain, way down deep inside my brain, like the original animal part of my brain, where the instinct for survival, I touched into the instinct for survival, which did not have to do with my willpower. It had to do with this, it gave me willpower. It gave me this strength, I suddenly became very animal, not really rational. I didn't need my rationality. I just became this driven creature for survival. And by the time we reached this last rappel, it was sometime before dawn, hours before dawn, and we were out of food and out of energy, and frostbite was advanced, 2nd degree blisters, not black. And not all, and I didn't have blisters everywhere, blisters on my fingers and my toes, not all over me. And we reached this place that's a ledge. I should describe this place. We made it to the 2nd rappel after having serious problems on the 1st rappel. We made it to the 2nd rappel, and it's down this craggy, rocky surface. And we rounded this corner onto this ledge. And on this ledge, there were 2 iron pins epoxied into the mountain with rings, iron rings, and carabiners and straps and a carabiner so you could clip in. So I was clipped into my harness, and Tim was clipped into his harness. First time all night. Now we're not going to fall. So we're in this. That's the first time all night we're safe from that. And we had traversed across, to the right side is mountain, to the left side is a 500-foot fall. It was crazy. So Tim's to my left. I'm to the right. I have the rope. I take one end of the rope and I tied it to I took off my mittens, my wool mittens with the leather chaps on them, and had to think about tying this knot. I had to think about the muscles, moving the muscles in my hands, because my muscles are freaking freezing. So movement is hard, and so I'm making this knot to my harness, and then I make the knot to the harness of bowline. And I make this bowline to my harness. And I take the other end of the line. It's called the bitter end. And I take the bitter end and I toss it out around the corner of this crag, of this corner of this rock. And as soon as I hear it hit the rock, I pull on the rope. And as soon as I pull on the rope, it stuck. It jammed into something. And the harder I pulled, the deeper, the tighter the stuck became. And I had pulled maybe 6 inches, maybe a foot before it jammed, if that much. Now, I can't go back up the way we came down. I only have half the rope. I can't reascend the rope. I can't go out around the corner in the condition that I'm in to try to climb in the dark back up to free the rope 100, 150 feet above my head. So now we're in this situation where I know that I'm going to die. I now know that I'm not going to get this rope free and that I can't ascend back up. But I kept pulling on the rope. Maybe it can come free. So by this point, hypothermia is advanced. And Tim is to my left, and he's in his own world, and I'm in my own world. We're not really paying attention to each other at all. I'm just trying to pull on the rope, and I'm just trying to stay alive. And suddenly, all of the blood rushed from my legs and my arms into my chest. But this is what it felt like to me anyway, because my chest became hot, and my head became hot, and my belly became hot. And as what I felt like all the blood rushing, and I thought to myself, I don't need my feet to survive. I really just need my heart and my lungs and my brain. I probably don't even need my abdomen, but I need my heart and my brain and my lungs. And I thought, this is a good thing that I have all of my blood. My warmth is going to the vital organs that need them. And so I unzipped my coat because I was hot, even though that sounds irrational. Because it was irrational. This is people who die of exposure, hypothermia, they are often or sometimes found naked or with their coats off. because this is what happens. Your body feels like it's hot, and irrationally, I unzipped my coat. And Tim saw me do this, and he yelled at me, "Zip your coat back up," in this sort of high-pitched, commanding, panicky kind of tone that I hadn't heard for the entire trip that I was with him on. And I said, I'm not zipping my coat back up. I'm hot.
And you were trained and you knew from the ski patrol that this was totally the wrong thing to do.
I knew better.
Yeah.
That's totally the wrong thing to do. And I've been making irrational decisions all night. My decision-making capacity kept declining. And so I unzip my coat, and now I exacerbate my situation. I make myself colder because now I have this. It was just an LL Bean 60/40 jacket. I don't know if anybody remembers those. It's just a shell. I unzipped my shell, made out of cotton and poly or something, sprayed with silicone for waterproof. So I unzip my coat, and at this point, I realize that this is it. I know now. I knew enough. It was an irrational decision, but I knew enough that this was one of the final stages, and I was not going to get out of this. This rope was stuck. I had minutes left to my life, and as I was thinking about this, I had this peace wash over me, a peace of acceptance. Sometimes when someone's dying and they have cancer and they've been fighting against their cancer for a year or 4 years or whatever it is, and then when they're in their bed and their prognosis is imminently terminal, there's this overwhelming acceptance and this wash of peace. And I had this wash of peace come over me, and I looked out over the mountains, and I could still hear the Saskatchewan River, which is right at the bottom. I could hear it running all night long, and beautiful mountains across the Icefields Parkway, and 10 bazillion stars in the sky of every single color there is. Pulsating is so many stars. It's so beautiful there. And I started having this experience of this acceptance, and I thought, oh, my parents are going to lose another child. My sister had run away when I was a kid and broke my family in a pretty hard way. And this was why I didn't want to go back to Boston, which is why I was on this climb in the first place. But I regretted this situation that I was in, and that I knew that I was going to cause my parents so much more pain, and that it wasn't going to be this private thing. It's going to be this international college student thing. 2 Montana State University students on exchange from here and there, and die ice climbing in Canada, and my parents are going to live the rest of their lives with this pain, and so I could do nothing about that. And then I began to fall asleep. My falling asleep was like a curtain fall on a stage. Kablam! The curtain falls down, and totally black theater. And so my mind would go blank. This curtain would fall, and I would fall asleep, blank mind, and collapse and land on the ledge that I'm standing on, smack my helmeted head, and bump my shoulder, and wake back up because of the jarring, and pull myself back up again. And
so it's a good thing you're on that ledge with the hooks kind of glued into the rock, because if you pass out, it does keep you fastened to where you are. You're not going to fall down the cliff and die nonetheless. That was the one place to have that happen if it was going to happen, correct?
Yeah, and I actually never put that together until you just said that. But yeah, if it's going to happen, that's the good place to have it happen. Because the strap did stop me from falling off the mountain, and I would fall. I fell asleep 2, 3, 4. I don't know how many times I fell asleep and stand back up, and because I was in this state of this. Even when I was standing back up again, I was still in this exhaustion state. My brain, my body frozen, exhausted, and still kind of fuzzy with all of this world, and pulling on the rope. And then I stand up this last time I stood up, and I pull on the rope. And as I pull on the rope, I see around my peripheral vision this big black circle, and this big black circle completely surrounds me. And as I see this circle, it starts to close very rapidly, this black circle closing down my vision, making it into tunnel vision. And the tunnel vision would swing. I was looking around. I was like, what is this thing? And I was looking around. I look at Tim, and he's like, I can see the tunnel getting tinier. And basically my field of vision got narrowed down like a lens, like lensed right down to a single spot. And then it just went out.
Hmm.
And as it was going out, I was confused. I was wondering what was going on. And I thought, oh, I must be falling asleep again. And then it goes out and I'm not asleep. I am awake. And I don't have any pain anymore. And I don't understand what's going on. How come I still have consciousness when I should be asleep? And as I'm having these confusing thoughts, where the mountain had been in front of me now just opened up into this vast darkness. And this vast darkness extended into infinity. But I could see in this darkness because almost immediately, way far, 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 far away, it's like a pinprick of light appeared. And this pinprick of light traveled across this vast distance faster than the speed of light, filling the field as it came toward me, expanding in this light. And as it rushed toward me, it communicated to me telepathically with no language, just like a download of information. I'm taking you. And I thought, no, you're not. I don't know what's going on here, but I'm not going anywhere. And so I took all this willpower from my insides and I put it up like a shield against this oncoming power. And it just reached through and took me as if I had no power at all. And as it took me, it communicated to me all power, all intellect, all beauty, and just absorbed me into itself. And I went with it. And I was inside of it, and it was transparent, and it was communicating to me without language, communicating to me love and comfort and wellness. And I could see myself inside of it. I had this like a body made of light, but not molecules, still sort of shaped like a human being. And I was inside this orb, and I could see this from the outside. I was also outside of this entity, this angelic being, this intelligence that was carrying me. I could see it. I was like a single eye in this vast field of darkness with no location. And I could see myself inside of this. I had these 2 points of view, and I was also inside of this angelic being, and I could see out through it, but I couldn't see myself outside. And I was traveling up inside this thing along the trajectory that it had come down. I think of it as like of an elevator shaft. It's like whoosh, back up the same route I took, the same route it took to come get me. And we reached this point at which it had entered this vast field of darkness. And then it, I don't know, unfolded, or I popped out of it. I should also say there was this power to it. This divine entity was like a reduction of infinite. It was the same quality of the infinite, but it was a reduction of it. And I knew that it was superpositioned. I knew that all of its power came from this other part of itself that wasn't here. I knew that it was much bigger and more grand and more powerful than even what it was showing me. And I was like a rag doll to it.
So was it like boundless energy, like
Yeah.
just infinite
Yeah.
energy, or
Like, but not just energy, but like power and intellect and comfort and control. And I had no autonomy left. I had no agency, not autonomy, agency. I had no capacity for making any single choice. I could think a choice, but I couldn't make the choice happen. I could, but not that I cared, because I didn't. I was content. I was content and comfortable.
So yeah, I was going to ask a question. The blackness, because that would scare me when I died. Like even if it's for a couple seconds, the blackness. What do you think that is? What do you think that barrier is between your death and the light and the greater consciousness that you felt? What is that barrier? Any idea what that is?
I think it's the energy field where energy becomes matter in the world. I think it's the veil over which, it's like the opening of the veil. When the veil first comes off, it reveals itself to be darkness, but it's not darkness it's not darkness like, I wasn't scared. I was confused. It wasn't frightening. It was just something different.
Was it cold? I guess I'm trying. I shouldn't be putting material things to it, because I talked to someone else who said, like, here on Earth, you breathe its air. In the afterlife, it's consciousness. It's a totally
Yeah,
different
that's a great way to talk.
environment that you're in.
That's a great way to talk about it, breathing in consciousness. This in-between place was immaterial to me by the time I reached the other side of it. It was just a place between the worlds. It was the heaven between heavens. There's a series of books called The Golden Compass and The Subtle Knife by, I can't remember the guy's name, but in it he talks about universes, and he describes these universes as if they were balloons, and all these balloons, each balloon is a universe, and all these balloons are inside a very large trash bag, like a contractor's trash bag, but the contractor's trash bag is the size of the galaxy, and all of these balloons are bumping up against each other, and there's sort of this space between these universes. This space, this darkness was like a space between. It was like a connecting place between. It wasn't heaven and it wasn't earth. It was this transitory place that I was only there for moments. The darkness that I entered into after I was transitioned out of this angelic being was far vaster and more illuminative. And it was a place of nothingness. And I was the only entity inside this nothingness, this darkness. I was much, much, much 10,000 times larger than I'd ever been as a human being. And I was only pure energy. And I had no more physicality at all, not even a light body. I was just an orb of consciousness inside a greater consciousness. And I knew that this greater consciousness was the divine. And I could see in every direction at once, way to the edge of infinity. There was a place at which I could not see beyond, and that was the dark darkness. But that dark darkness wasn't evil. It was just incomprehensible to me. The darkness isn't dark because it's not illuminated. It's because we can't comprehend it, because its capacities are so far beyond us. It's like me trying to explain to a molecule what it is to have a brain. The molecule can't possibly understand. It's only gobbledygook and darkness. But this darkness was illuminated, this full illumination in expansion, and I was an orb of consciousness inside it and could see in every single direction at once, and I was in comfort. I was unafraid. I remembered my true self. This is me. This is really me. How did I think that I had ever been anything other than this? Well, I had been trapped.
Wow.
Now I'm not trapped. Now I'm free and myself. And as I'm myself in this expansive state, in this much larger, infinite space of dark illumination, a tear, an opening, a waterfall, an eruption, a doorway of light suddenly opens in this darkness, and it rushes toward me, comes right close to me, and it's much bigger than me, not nearly the size of the entire space I'm in, but compared to me, it's gigantic, and it is the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. It was a flow like a waterfall of iridescent water, and it was all of the colors of all of the stars I'd seen that night, and all these other colors I'd never seen before. The full spectrum. I could see the full spectrum of electromagnetic radiation from ultraviolet and X-ray and more than that. And it was all these colors, and I could see the surface of it, and I could see into it, and I could see through it, all these colors, and all simultaneously, all of these colors were one color. They were all white. So there's this two vision thing going on. It's both at the same time. And I can see the surface of it, and I can see the depth of it, and I can see through it. It's transparent and translucent and solid all at the same time. And I can see with this eye that sees all of these things. And as it comes to me, and its beauty it's radiating beauty and love, and I just want it with all of myself. And so I touch it with my energy form. And as I touch it, I open up, and it flows into me, and it expands inside me and infills me. And all these things happen all simultaneously. This is a place of timelessness where everything happens at once. And they're distinct from each other, but they are all in the same place. I don't know how to explain it. And everything I say is in metaphor because I have no words for this place. Everything anybody ever says about it is in metaphor because you don't have a brain when you're there.
Yeah. So you didn't have any sense of prior familiar earth beings, mother, father, or anything. It was all this greater vision, this greater spirit, or what would you call it? The divine. That was pretty much your connection. There was no connection to any prior family or anyone that passed before you, correct?
No, nobody. But I lacked nothing. I lacked absolutely nothing. The totality of all being was revealed to me. This completeness. It expanded inside of me. There was beauty and truth and knowledge and understanding and intellect and all love, all things, and all the universe. This was all life that poured inside of me. There was no thing absent from it. I didn't miss my parents or my great grandmother or because everything was there and not separate from each other. They were all one united being of love. It wasn't like my grandmother came to me, but the power of the love was all things that existed and all things that don't exist. And it just filled inside me and expanded me, and all sorts of things happened at the same time.
Wow.
I heard and saw the origin of myself, not my human self, but my consciousness self. I understood that I had been created by this creator. I understood that I was a photon of light made from a bazillion photons of this field of photons that all collective were the us of the divine self. And I was a singular, separate part of it, but superpositioned in it, made as one of it. It was all these photons, and I was a photon, and I was created from it, but I was also part of it. And I saw the length of the life of my soul, my consciousness all over eons. I saw many lives I was living because I'm in timelessness, and all these lives are at the same time. And I got to see inside two of them, and I got to see that none of them were me, that I was this photon. I was this elongated soul that lived all these eons, and I was being breathed into being at all times. So I was both ancient and new simultaneously, and that the divine was calling me into being as I existed.
So does that imply reincarnation, or part of you is reincarnated while the other part of you remains wherever you are? I guess you could call it heaven. Does your soul come back to Earth, or does part of it come back, but the other part is maybe in an alternate universe, or does it stay back in this heaven with this divine light and energy?
I might say all of the above. There was so much more. I've been describing it this way. My consciousness was like a big baguette, and I'm this long loaf of bread. And in this baguette are spears, like toothpicks. And the toothpicks are my physical lives. There's maybe, say, 100 toothpicks in this baguette, and the toothpicks take up such tiny little space of the baguette. And they're real, but they're not me. They've never been me. Even while I was seeing the length of the life of my soul, I was observing that from the outside. I was both in it and outside it simultaneously. So I knew that the origin of myself is infinity, and that all the rest of this is not real. It's the only real now for me is the divine being itself. All the rest of this stuff, all the lives I had lived or am living, they're immaterial to me.
I could see how that would change your relationships or even your faith. You became a reverend after this, which was kind of interesting because it seemed to go against religion somewhat. And have you talked to other people that have had similar experiences to you? Or because you hear different versions of NDEs, some where they see loved ones, some where it's kind of what you're talking about. What has been your experience now that you've been sharing this? Have you seen a lot of people that have similar to what you experienced?
There are a few. One of the producers in the movie, that's why she reached out to me. Her near-death experience was very similar. So she's one of maybe 5. So it's rare. I think that you get the NDE that you need. And also, I think you get the NDE that you've accumulated, I guess, might be a way to put it.
That is a stroke of fortune to have a producer that has your same vision. I mean,
Well,
someone that you can communicate with, for a film, because otherwise it could fall flat. That's a great stroke of divinity, providence, or whatever. But that's a great thing to have a producer that's been through what you've been through.
I couldn't imagine a better situation because I don't half the stuff I don't even have to explain to her.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh yeah, I get that. Yeah. So, but I also had a life review, and my life review was my human life that I was just leaving. And in that life review, I went through all of the pain that I gave everyone in my entire life from inside of their experience. I relived with them every single experience of pain that I gave everybody in my life from inside them, and felt their pain and felt their astonishment or bewilderment or jealousy or whatever the chemical emotions responses that they were happening. They washed over me and into me, and I experienced them with them, and I recognized how much pain I had caused in the world. And simultaneous to this, I was also superpositioned again in myself, my previous life, my human being as Peter, experiencing all of the reasons and emotions and thinking thoughts that I thought when I was causing them their pain simultaneously. So I have these 2 points of view. In one, I'm feeling all this pain that I'm giving this person, and point of view A, I'm giving them all the pain because I want to give it to them because I'm hurting. And so I judged myself as guilty for the pain that I caused, not because I was bad, but because love was so great. There was so much love around me that it showed me my own frailties. No part of me was unseen. All of me in my human life and all of me in my soul life, I was completely naked. I had no hiding places. I was shown this life that I had, and I found this forgiveness that was given to me because I was creature made of love by love and always was beloved. And so I saw that God had no gender, God had no religion, God had no form, no concepts, no ideas, only this love and this beauty, healing and wholeness, understanding and intellect. And so, yeah, I became a reverend because I was hiding out in the church. Where else was I going to go in order to pursue this with the entire intensity that I applied to it for 30 years and still today, of yoga life and meditation life and study life? I needed to find a way home. And Christianity, which I was raised in, Roman Catholic and Greek Orthodox, simultaneously two churches that hate each other or have in the past, and both claiming to hold the truth. I figured I could hide inside the church and no one would suspect. Then I'd be able to, I could spend time every day in meditation, time every day in yoga, time every day in my research, my scholarly research around what the heck happened to me.
So you did like several decades of research before writing this book. You had the experience, and then you were spent a couple decades getting your mind around it. You experienced it, but what does it mean? Did you find in the afterlife the thing we all want? Was there a purpose? Did you feel that there was a meaning and a purpose for consciousness in your existence?
The purpose in my afterlife was being itself. It was adoration of the divine. It was the presence of the light itself. There was no purpose for me beyond that. And in this life here, the purpose I have in this life is to bring that same thing. I want that same thing, and I want to channel that here. My purpose in living is to bring heaven here now. And my purpose in death was to go to heaven there as much as I could be, to shed of myself. It's the same purpose for me. It's just that here I'm stuck inside this form, this veil that covers over 99.9% of what I knew and experienced on the other side. And so I've had to strive my whole life in order to dig a well inside myself to reach back to this place of my origin. And so my purpose, and this is not everybody's purpose. Well, that's not quite true. I think everybody's purpose is to just be in the divine presence. My purpose is to pursue this with all of my being until the day I die and don't come back again in this body.
Yeah, I made a documentary called Afraid of Nothing, and one of the people was a co-author of a book on biocentrism, which is really, put simply, is that rather than physics creates the world which we observe, and just out of pure luck, humans came and we had consciousness. It's the other way around. It's that observation and consciousness creates the world. So it was kind of a unique view. And he had an experience, which I covered at the end of the documentary, where he was studying. It wasn't like a near-death experience, but this weird thing happened where all of a sudden he became like one with the universe. And
it can happen.
he explained it incredibly. And the thing he talked about was like before he was like a canary in a cage. But once he became part of everything, it was like the cage was open and he was free and he was a part of everything and he loved everything. And when he slowly got back to his normal physical self, which did take him a little bit of quite a while beyond that night, all he thought about was going back home, kind of like what you said.
Yeah, because all over the world, through the history of the world, there have been mystical experiences like the one you just described that had nothing to do with NDE, but are very similar to near-death experience.
Yeah, yeah. So when did the trigger happen where you had a choice to come back, and why did you? And I'm curious, what happened to Tim? Did he just pass out and nothing happened to him, or what happened to him while you were going through this?
Well, Tim, to go to Tim first, when I came back, Tim was in a yelling, screaming, panicky state, trying to wake me because as my brain came back online and I began to understand language again, I could hear him screaming, "Don't die! Don't die! Don't die! Don't die! Don't die! Don't die!" And when I opened my eyes and he hauled me up, helped me stand, he was, "You were dead! You were dead!" And he'd been extraordinarily level-headed through the whole night. We both had been, but this was the end. And in the end, he was in tears because he said, "If you die, I'm going to die." And he was terrified. But when I was in heaven, before I came back, what I call heaven, this nothingness, this fullness, after my life review, I had returned from this state of union into somehow remembering my previous recent life. And I could see my parents suffering. I was like, my parents they're going to lose another child. They lost my sister. They're going to lose me too. And it's going to destroy them. And as I said this, I was swept across heaven, which is the belly of God. It's not like it's separate. It is the divine presence itself. And this divine presence was inside of me, right next to me, and I was inside of it. But the part that was next to me, I couldn't see. But I knew that it was there. And it swept me across this heaven to this edge where energy becomes matter, I could say, like a Higgs boson field.
Mm-hmm.
And part of my consciousness was stuck outside of this heaven space into our universe. And I could see all of our universe, all of it, all of the galaxies. My attention was directed toward the origin of the universe. And as I was directed, I could see all these galaxies. I could see universe upon universe upon universe unfolding one after the other and staying. They're like more and more universes, and they're all like layered, and they're like a petal of a flower petals opening up. And I could see the origin of them, but I couldn't see the love that was behind them. But I could feel the love permeating all of them. This love that was so overwhelming, that was inside of every single part of it and was inside of our entire universe. And I could see it inside of everything. The voice without sound, in which I was inside of, surrounding me and was me, kept saying, "All of my creation is made through love. I am love. Everything is love, 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 love. Because of my love, all has been well, all will be well, and all is well for everything I make, because I am everything." And then my vision was swept back towards our galaxy, towards our solar system, towards our Earth. And our Earth was like a hologram, live time. The moment that I'm seeing it is the moment people are living it. And there's 7 billion people at that point on Earth, and I can see every single one of them. And there are wars and rape and love and murder and joy and babies being born and boredom and artwork and ships at sea. And I can see all of it at the same time. And inside every single human being is a golden fleck of light that is the divine presence. I can see this light inside all of it, and all of it is covered by a foam, like a thickness, a fog, and nobody can see this in anyone else to the intensity that I can see so plainly here. It's visible everywhere. And I can then see, I understand that every person is made of this and that they can't see the light inside everyone else. And so they live in suffering there. And I saw my parents' lives. I saw all of their accumulated suffering up to this point. It would be like, well, all of their accumulated suffering expressed in one expression on their face, and being able to see all of the pain that they had suffered, all collected in one spot. And then I saw these two parallel life tracks. I saw their life without me, if I die, and their life with me if I don't die. And with I don't die, they still have suffering, but it's not as much suffering as if I do die. And then I saw their deaths, and their deaths were exactly the same, no difference between them. And in their deaths, they were like me. This golden light inside them became who they have always been. And they were well and whole, and it didn't matter which track they took. And the voice said to me, in the way that I love you now, I have always loved you and always will love you. And all is well because of this. And if you just wait, they'll be here in a moment, because I'm in timelessness, and it exists in a very different way than time. And I understood that they would be there. I understood the length of a human life is a snap of the fingers. And I said, but the length of their life is still the living experience, and they're going to suffer so much without me. Can I go back there? And the voice said, yes, you can go back there. I said, well, if I go back there, can I come back here to this state of being beloved? And the voice said, yes, you can come back here. And the voice is also saying, stay. It's time for you to stay. Come home. Giving me this choice, but it's time for you to come home. And I say, well, if I can come back here, then I choose to live my life. And the voice says, you won't live your life. And out you go.
And that was true, because the next several decades, you were kind of searching for the meaning of what you'd left, right? And it did impact your friendships and your family.
Oh, yeah. And I dropped my graduate school career, and I went to divinity school to study mysticism, which they didn't even teach at Yale, but my dean let me study it. And then I went into I was in this 20-year silence about what had happened to me, while I found tools, primarily through the Yoga Sutras, Paramahansa Yogananda, and centering prayer practice, these techniques that I've been using in my contemplative life. I've been in pursuit of a contemplation life, a life of contemplation and study in the midst of the world. And ministry, I was in the church. This dean from the divinity school talked me into it. I didn't want to do the job, but it was all about service to others. My whole life has been helping people, which has been a form of spirituality in itself.
Did you ever talk about this with Tim, or did it just kind of...
No.
Nah, you never did, huh? Has he heard about it since then, or do you think that he'll see the movie someday?
We hope so. I wrote a letter to him. I had his first name in my little tiny address book. I didn't have his last name, and I had his local phone number. And so by the time all this was over, and by the time I started processing it, I had forgotten his last name, because I'm like that. So I tried to find him. The publisher and we tried to find him. We went back to the university. We went to the log books at the Canadian Park Service, and we hired a detective, and nothing happened. And I wrote a letter to him in the book, and the publisher said, no, that's money we don't want to spend on that page. If he sees the book, he'll see himself in it. Part of my purpose in trying to find him before I wrote it is because I wanted to talk to him about it. He was an atheist, and he told me on the way up that the one subject, because he knew I was a meditator, and I'd already been a meditator, and he's like, we're not talking no religion talk, no spirituality talk.
That's ironic. Wow. Do they take names of people that go up that hill? Was there a warden or something that they...
Oh, yeah, they do. You do. There's a logbook. Every time you go into any wilderness area anywhere, at least in the United States and Canada, which is pretty much the only place I've been in the wilderness, you sign into a logbook. My name is Peter Panagore. It's 9 a.m. I'm going to this trailhead. I'm going to hike this trail, and I'm going to be out at this point at this time today or next week. And so there was a logbook In the middle of the night, I didn't tell this part of the story. In the middle of the night, the warden, he came looking for us because we didn't sign out.
Yeah, that's the thing they can almost see in the movie, because that's a flicker of hope that went away. So we'll save that for them to read the book and the movie. But that was an interesting thing as
Yeah.
well, I thought.
Yep, that's exactly what it was
Yeah.
like.
You spend 40 years, you write the book in 2015, and then you have another near-death experience. Can you cover that?
Sure. In 2015, so the book is due to come out, and I'm at a yoga class and I have a heart attack. And I was a fit guy. I've been a vegetarian for 20 years. I ran 5K the day before, but my family has a congenital thing. It killed my grandfather. It killed my sister who ran away, and it almost killed my dad, but they life flighted him and gave him a decoagulant. And so I'm in this yoga class and I start having this heart attack. I'm like, oh, and I'd been an ambulance attendant in my life too. And so I'm like, oh, I self-diagnosed. I'm having a heart attack. And then I say to myself, I can't be a bad heart attack. I'm in great shape. So I left the yoga class and I went out and I lay down in the grass outside and I thought, it'll go away because I'm Mr. Fit. And it didn't go away, and it got worse and worse and worse. And I finally decided, I should say, when I realized how bad it was, I decided that I would go to the urgent care center. Our hospital had closed recently, and we had an urgent care center. And I thought, I'll get myself over to the urgent care center. So I tried to sit up, and I couldn't even sit up. It was like an exploding asteroid in my heart, of pain. And so I lay back down. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to die today. I didn't know that. All my life, I'd been praying to die. In the midst of my contemplative life, every single day I prayed to die, one way or another.
Yeah.
Oh, take me home today. Today is a good day today. Do I have to stay here? Whatever the prayer was, I was always like, can I get out of here? So when my day came, I was ecstatic. I was like, yeah, and then I thought, oh, I'm going to die out here. And all these women coming, because I was the only guy in the class that day.
Yeah.
All these women are going to come out, and I know half of them, they're all going to be, oh my God, he died. But I was happy about it. And so, long story short, one of the women helps me to get to the urgent care center because they come outside and I'm still alive, but I'm dying. I mean, like, I know I'm dying. And so we get to the urgent care center. Now it's a half an hour, at least a half an hour, probably 40 minutes by the time I even got there. And they do an x-ray and I've got 100% blockage in my widowmaker. And the doc says, we can give you a decoagulant. You might get a 3% trickle through. And then you've got to take the ambulance, the hour and a half ride down to the catheterization lab. And do you want some morphine? And I'm like, no, morphine makes me sick because I'll be vomiting. I'll be in the back of the ambulance and vomiting with a heart attack while wearing an oxygen mask. Not a good setup. And so he said, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to meditate because there's an easy technique. And people are like, how can that possibly be easy? But it is. There's an easy technique of looking at your pain. And if you practice looking at your pain with your breath and your mind, and you sharpen your mind to your pain, you rise above your pain. And as long as you're in the state of observation of your pain, witnessing your pain with an intensity in your breath, you don't feel it. It totally works. And I've been practicing that particular technique most of my life. And so I said, I'm going to use my meditation and I'm going to focus on my pain and I'll be fine. So they give me this decoagulant. They load me on the gurney. And now it's an hour. And so I'm outside my golden hour of survivability. I don't know if you know about that with heart attacks. You get an hour. Yep. And so now by the time I'm even leaving, I'm already in trouble. And my son shows up and he's 26 years old, I guess, and squeezes my hand, looks at my face, and I love you, Dad. And I can see all this like, oh my God, he has not prepared for this at all. I mean, how could he be? This is shock. And my wife is standing by me and she squeezes my hand. I look up at her and I'm like, see ya, love ya, but I told ya, first chance I get to die, I am out of here. I'm going back home. And I've been living in exile all these years. And so off I go in the ambulance. And I'm meditating, and on the way, this hour and a half drive, and I'm wired up. I got an IV in my arm and oxygen and blood pressure, and I get the whole thing going on there in the back of the ambulance. And the paramedic, I hear her say over the radio, I hear her, they're all talking. You can hear when you're meditating, but you just don't attach to the sound. But then I hear her say, Base, we're losing him. He's dying, or something to that effect. And I'm like, oh. And so I open my eyes and I look up at her and she's got fear on her face, but she drops professionally into her game face. showing confidence to me. But the pain rushes back to me like a steam train. And so I'm immediately wanting to go back inside myself to control my pain with my meditation. And when I go back into focus, I am not in my body anymore. I am outside my body and I am in complete painlessness. And I can, like, there's this huge cavern where I can look down inside myself, but I know that that's what I was and not who I am. And as I'm outside this cavernous opening into my body, I'm in this tunnel, and in the side of this tunnel, this darkness, the same angelic being comes rushing down toward me. Come home, we're welcoming you. We missed you. It's your time. Come home, come home. And I'm like, I'm out of here. So I start to go. And then I think, well, wait a minute. My son's face. I should think about this. If I'm not confused this time. I know what's going on. I was like, hey, hang in there, Angel. I'm going to take a peek around on the inside, make sure it's all set before I leave, because I'm kind of unprepared for this. And so I go back inside this cavernous place, and I see my son's face, and I see into his emotional life, and I see into his future life that he's not ready for me to go. And then my daughter had just had a divorce, or was getting a divorce from a guy who had gone off to Afghanistan, and terrible things happened to this poor man. But he came back pretty wounded, and bad things happened, and she had a baby, and we had just rescued her and the baby. And who was going to be the grandfather? Who was going to be the father figure? Who was going to be there to help them and protect them? And I saw inside my granddaughter's life with me and without me. And I'm like, I got to stick around. And so I turned around and I went back outside into this tunnel, and the angelic form, which had receded, came rushing back down toward me. And I said, I didn't ask permission. I said, if it's okay with you, I'm staying. And I turned around and I went back in, and I came out a different person.
Oh.
Part of the difference for me now is like, I'm cool with being here. I'm like integrated in. Like, that's okay. I'll be here as long as I need to be.
Which is kind of a happy ending before the ending, right? I mean, it's kind of it's nice in a way. It's a very interesting life journey. Let's talk briefly before we go about the movie. How did the movie come around? You had mentioned the producer who had a similar experience as you reached out to you. That must have been a strange day.
I had done a podcast the day before, and she listens to this podcast. And so the next day I get this phone call, and she says, I'm so-and-so, and I had this near-death experience. She died 3 times on the operating table and had this very similar experience. She said, you're the first person I've ever heard who's had a similar experience, and I really had to talk to you. And so as she's talking to me, I look her up. She tells me her name, where she lives, and I look her up, and I was like, oh, she's a Hollywood producer. I'm like, that's interesting.
Wow.
And so we talked for like a year, every week for a year, just talking about our near-death experiences and talking about integration and meditation and all these things. We're just friends. And then a year rolls by, and one day I'm out in my car in Portland, Maine, and I have this conversation with her, and she says to me, so Peter, who's doing your movie? And I said, I don't know, you? And she said, yes. And my ex, who's a bigger producer than me. And so within an hour, I'm on the phone with the two of them. And he's like, yeah, I'm looking for a movie right now. I'll read the book. So he reads the book. And within, I guess, October, November, December, January, by the end of January, February, maybe beginning of March, I had a contract for this, a really good contract, like a great contract. That was 2 years ago. And then I had to, the book is Act 2 of a 3-act play. Yeah, every play is 3 acts. And so I've had to write, I wrote 2 books for them, and neither of them were what they wanted. And by the time they critiqued my writing and helped me reform my style, I now have most of Act 1 done, and we're aiming towards Act 3. I'll be finished with this by March, and then it'll be going off into production.
So you're writing the screenplay?
Well, no, the screenplay is a specialty. I'm writing a 3rd book.
Okay.
They're optioning this 3rd book because part of it's going to be in this movie, and they want to make another movie about the book after.
Okay.
And I was just in Malibu meeting with them like a month ago, pushing this thing on. It's a pretty astounding thing that's happened to me. In all my life as a writer, I never once ever thought I'd ever be in this position to have an opportunity to use mass media as an expression for the divine. I am not a religious person. I am a reverend by ordination. I'm no longer associated with a denomination. But some of my friends call me the irreverend because I'm like, I'm not what you expect. um, so I'm making a movie now. And the other thing is I had this crazy thing happen to me. I was in the ministry for 18 years. I was a pulpit minister. Terrible, great, wonderful, horrible things happened. Like all sorts of stuff happened. And then I got recruited to television. I spent 15 years in TV. I don't have any control. I don't know how this thing happens. All I do is pursue the divine. The more I pursue it on my interior journey, the more I go inward, the more radiance there is inside of me, the more magic happens around me. And it's not like I'm making anything. I drive myself. I'm a pretty driven person.
It just kind of unfolds. Your story unfolds around you.
Yeah, it just kind of unfolds, right?
Do you have crazy, funky dreams at night that remind you of what happened to you? Now, I'm just curious. Does it ever go into your sleeping time as well?
Well, I have a lot of crazy stuff. Dreaming isn't really one of them so much. I leave my body. I don't make myself leave my body, but I've been out a whole bunch of times back into the divine.
So astral travel?
I get a rapture would be a better way to put it.
Really?
I get grabbed and pulled and brought into the divine presence.
Really?
And
wow.
When I came back, I thought a lot about astral travel because I'd had some experience with it, but I decided not to pursue it because if I could just pursue the oneness of being, the singleness, the unitive state that I was in, then all these other things are secondary to that.
Yeah, sure.
So lots of mystical experiences, I live dislocated in time. I see my future before it happens all day long.
My God.
Like,
wow. Jeez. So is the movie going to do well? I guess that's what I should ask you.
No, I don't see like that. I only see moments ahead. But okay. I can tell you this much though. The trajectory of my life has always been success and failure. I don't have an expectation for it. My expectation is the process of it. I work in the now with it. I work very diligently and hard at my components of it, as I know they will. If it's meant to become a blockbuster, they filled my head with fantasies of very large budgets to make this happen. It has potential for that, but I can't think about that. I can only think about being in my space and doing my job and letting this go the course it goes.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that could probably stop it is a recession in 2023. Let's hope not. I'm knocking on wood for you right now.
Let's knock on wood there. Well, 1,000 things could happen. I could get hit by a car. I mean, I had this other show. I developed a children's show with a whole bunch of investors. I was working with somebody else from Hollywood who's a writer for some famous comedy shows. How that connected was crazy. And then somebody from Sesame Workshop who used to build Big Bird. And we had this pile of money that was collected from all these people. And it was serious financial people with serious business sense. And we developed a children's show that we almost sold. We were working with the vice president from Cartoon Network, who was the president of Time Warner, was the prep school roommate of one of my investors. It's just this crazy set of things that happened. But we didn't sell it. In the end, we spent 5 years in development of it, and it didn't sell. And so I learned from that lesson that I'll put in all the work that I possibly can with all the dedication that I can for this film, but I'm not attached to the outcome. I wanted to succeed. Of course I do. Yeah. But if it doesn't, I can't change that.
It's just a toothpick, right?
It's just a toothpick. Picking the flick out of my teeth.
That's right. Before the movie comes out, where can they get the book? And you have a very unique email, .love. I never heard of that before. If people listen to the show and they have a similar type of experience, is there a way? Do you feel comfortable sharing your email, or is there a website they should go to?
All of the above. So I run a global counseling service for near-death experiencers who are trying to integrate, and also people who've had other kinds of mystical experiences that they can't talk about because society doesn't allow that to happen. So I help people. Yeah. I'm at peterpanagore.love, peterpanagore.love. And my email address is peter@peterpanagore.love.
That's great. And your book, I'm sure it's probably available in all bookstores and Amazon and Audible, or?
Oh, yeah. It's all over the world. Audible, it's an Audible bestseller, international bestseller. It's all over the world.
Did you read it? Who does the narration for it?
A guy named Dan, I think his name is Dan Wotton, Wotton, and I didn't even know it was being made into an audiobook until my publisher called me one day and he said, so the audiobook is done. I was like, I wanted to read it.
Yeah, really, you have a good voice. You project very well the emotion and stuff on all the interviews, including this one. So I don't blame you there.
Yeah, it would have been fun, but Dan did a great job. He did.
Yeah, you're busy enough, I guess, right? And now you have this time with your. Well, I'm very happy that in this third part of your life, and after your second near-death experience, you are going to take time to be in the now, and rather than researching the afterlife, there's part of that, but mostly you just want to be with your family, I think, and you want to enjoy kind of what's here while you're here, which I think is a wonderful lesson.
I enjoy what's here while I'm here, and I just came back from my granddaughter's recital this evening. Her dance
That's
recital
awesome.
for Christmas.
How was she?
Yeah,
Was she good?
She was great.
There you go. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Peter. I appreciate it, and I will be looking for the movie. But it's an amazing story, and you do a great job with the writing or orating it. It's a fantastic story, and just a riveting to listen to. So thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Robert, for having me here, and peace to all of you who listen.
You've been listening to the Afraid of Nothing podcast. Please subscribe and like us on Facebook. Until next time, stay scared. Hey, you're still here? Great. Then why not listen to another episode? Visit AfraidOfNothingPodcast.com to peruse all the shows. That's AfraidOfNothingPodcast.com. And while you're there, click the coffee cup icon to buy me a coffee and leave a review. I'll give you a shout-out in an upcoming episode, and the world will know how swell you are.